I was just a waitress working double shifts to pay rent when he walked in, the wealthy customer who would change everything. First came the insult that broke me down in tears. Then came his unexpected response that didn't just change my life, it completely transformed it. "Hey there, I'm Haley. That's me, the one with the coffee pot in one hand and 3 order tickets in the other. For 6 years I've been serving plates and smiles at the Sunshine Diner on the corner of Hope and Main. It's not much, but it's honest work. The kind that leaves your feet aching and your uniform smelling like pancake syrup, no matter how many times you wash it. I never planned on being a waitress forever. I had dreams once, big ones. Art school, my own gallery someday. But life has a way of rearranging your plans, doesn't it? When my daughter Lily came along, those dreams got tucked away like old photos in a shoebox. Her father disappeared faster than a customer dodging the bill, and suddenly it was just me, my baby girl, and a stack of bills that seemed to grow taller every month. The apartment we call home is small, 1 bedroom that Lily gets while I sleep on the pull-out couch. The ceiling leaks when it rains, and the heating works when it feels like it. But we make it home. I hang Lily's artwork on the fridge, and we dance in our pajamas on Sunday mornings. Between rent, childcare, and keeping the lights on, every dollar gets stretched until it screams. I picked up night shifts when I could, sold handmade jewelry online when I had the energy, and learned to make a box of macaroni feed us for days. Pride's a luxury you can't afford when your kid needs new shoes and the rent's due tomorrow. But this isn't a story about how hard things were. This is about the day everything changed. About how sometimes life sends you to rock bottom only to show you it was never the bottom at all, but just the foundation for something greater. I want you to picture this. A tired waitress with coffee stains on her apron, serving tables for 12 hours straight. A wealthy man in a suit worth more than her yearly salary. A moment of humiliation that brought me to my knees. And then, a turn of events so unexpected it still feels like a dream I might wake up from. Stay with me as I share how one terrible moment led to the most unexpected blessing of my life. Because if there's one thing my journey taught me, it's that sometimes the worst day of your life can become the first day of a whole new one. My alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m., and my hand slaps it before the second beep. Not because I'm eager to start the day, but because Lily's a light sleeper. I shower in water that never quite gets hot enough, dress in the dark, and kiss my sleeping daughter's forehead before Mrs. Chen from next door comes to watch her until school. The walk to the diner takes exactly 17 minutes. I count them every morning while the streetlights still glow and the world is quiet. Sometimes it's the only peace I get all day. By 5:30, I'm tying my apron and brewing the first pot of coffee. The smell of it brewing is still one of my favorite things in the world. Mike, our cook, arrives with a grunt that passes for good morning and fires up the grill. We've worked together so long we barely need words anymore. Just the rhythm of orders called, plates passed, and tickets punched. The regulars start filing in by 6. There's Harold, who orders the same breakfast every day. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast dry, coffee black. He leaves the exact same tip, $2.37. There's the construction crew from the site down the block who come in loud and hungry, leaving a mess of syrup and creamer packets. And there's sweet Miss Patty who calls me honey and reads her romance novels while nursing a single cup of tea for an hour. I know their orders, their stories, their good days and bad. I've served them through divorces and promotions, through losses and celebrations. They don't see me, though. Not really. I'm just the hands that deliver their food, the smile that asks if they want a refill. Sometimes I wonder if I disappeared tomorrow, how long before they'd notice the difference. Between rushes, I sketch on order pad scraps, little doodles of customers, the skyline visible from our window, Lily's face from memory. Sometimes Karen, the other waitress, catches me and rolls her eyes. "Still playing with your drawings?" she asks, not unkindly but with the weariness of someone who gave up her own dreams so long ago she can't remember their shape anymore. By afternoon, my feet are throbbing in shoes I've patched with duct tape. I count my tips between serving the lunch crowd, mental calculations of how much goes to bills, to Lily's school supplies, to the emergency fund that never seems to grow. I'm $9 short of what we need for the electric bill this month. Maybe I can pick up an extra shift on Sunday. As I refill ketchup bottles and salt shakers, I watch people outside the window, business people in pressed suits, college students with their whole futures ahead of them. They're all going somewhere. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one standing still, caught in amber while the world moves forward without me. And yet, there's Lily waiting at home, her gap-toothed smile when I bring home leftover pie. The way she tells me, "You're the best mom in the whole universe," when I help with her science project, even though we had to make a solar system out of bottle caps and cardboard because we couldn't afford the fancy craft supplies. Those moments make the ache in my feet, and the endless coffee refills worth it. That was my life. Ordinary, difficult, but mine. Until the day he walked in and everything changed. It was a Friday in late September, one of those perfect autumn days when the light turns golden and the air feels crisp. The diner was slammed, as it always is on Fridays. Karen had called in sick, which meant I was handling twice the tables, running on pure adrenaline and my third cup of coffee. The lunch rush had just hit its peak, every table filled, the kitchen backed up, and the line out the door. My hair was falling out of its ponytail, there was a coffee stain on my sleeve from a toddler who'd grabbed my arm, and I hadn't had a chance to sit down in 4 hours. That's when the bell above the door chimed, and he walked in. You know how in movies, when someone important enters, the music changes and everyone turns to look? Real life isn't like that. Nobody noticed him except me, and that's only because I was watching the door to count how many more customers we could fit. He wasn't what you'd picture when you hear Billionaire. No flashy watch or designer labels screaming money. Just a tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my rent, with a quiet confidence that made the diner suddenly feel smaller. I don't know why, but something made me nervous as I grabbed a menu and led him to the only available spot, a small table by the window with a wobbly leg that we fixed with folded napkins. He thanked me with a smile that reached his eyes. Unusual enough that I noticed it. "I'll give you a minute to look over the menu," I said, already pivoting to check on my other tables. "Actually," he said, his voice unexpectedly warm, "I know what I'd like. Just a black coffee and the special, please." I scribbled it down, grateful for the simplicity, and rushed back to the chaos of my other tables, the family with 3 screaming children, the businessman on his phone who snapped his fingers to get my attention, the elderly couple who needed everything explained twice. When I finally returned with his order, I was balancing 6 plates along my arm and barely managing to set his down without spilling. "Enjoy," I breathed, already turning away. "Miss," he called, and I turned back, plastering on my customer service smile. "This isn't what I ordered." I looked down at his plate, the Friday meatloaf special with mashed potatoes and green beans, exactly what he'd asked for. "I'm sorry, sir, but you ordered the special." He frowned, his brow creasing. "No, I specifically asked for the salmon." I felt my cheeks flush. I knew he had ordered the special. But arguing with customers never ends well, especially not ones wearing $1,000 shoes. "I'll fix that right away, sir. I'm so sorry." As I reached for his plate, my exhaustion caught up with me. My hand trembled and the plate tilted. Gravy splashed onto the sleeve of his immaculate suit. Time seemed to stop. Horror washed over me as I grabbed for napkins. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, let me—" That's when it happened. His face hardened, and he looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Is incompetence a requirement for working here?" he said, voice dripping with contempt. "Or did they just make an exception for you?" The diner didn't go silent. The world didn't stop. But something in me did. "Perhaps this is why you're still serving tables instead of doing something that requires actual skill," he continued, dabbing at his sleeve with napkins. "Some people just aren't meant for more than this." Each word landed like a physical blow. Not because they were particularly creative insults. I'd heard worse from drunk customers on Saturday nights. But because in that moment, they confirmed every whispered fear that kept me awake at night. That this was all I'd ever be. That I wasn't meant for more. That the dreams I still held on to in secret were foolish. I mumbled another apology, took the plate, and somehow made it to the kitchen before the tears came. I cried silently by the dishwasher, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand while Mike pretended not to notice, giving me the small dignity of privacy in my breakdown. When I emerged with the salmon he never ordered, my eyes were dry but my hands were still shaking. I set it down without a word and walked away, finishing my shift on autopilot. He left an hour later. A $50 tip sat under his coffee cup, not an apology, but what felt worse, pity. As if my dignity could be bought for $50. I left it on the table when I cleaned up. That night, I cried into my pillow after Lily was asleep, muffling the sound so she wouldn't hear. It wasn't just his words. It was that for a brief, terrible moment, I believed them. I didn't know then that he'd come back the next day, or that when he did, nothing would ever be the same again. I almost called in sick the next morning. The thought of facing another day of endless coffee refills and demanding customers felt impossible after yesterday's humiliation. But Lily needed new school shoes, and pride doesn't pay bills. The diner was quieter than usual for a Saturday, a blessing I didn't question. I moved through my tasks mechanically, smiling on autopilot, my mind 1,000 miles away. Would the community college still accept me after all these years? Could I afford even one class a semester? Was I fooling myself to think I could still be more than this? The bell above the door jingled at exactly 10:17 a.m. I know because I was watching the clock, counting minutes until my break. I didn't look up until I heard someone clear their throat directly in front of me. There he stood, the same man from yesterday, but different somehow. The pristine suit was replaced by dark jeans and a simple button-down. His expression wasn't cold anymore, but uncertain, almost vulnerable. My stomach dropped. Had he come back to complain to my manager, to get me fired? I braced myself, notepad clutched like a shield. "Hello again," he said quietly. "May I have a moment of your time?" Karen must have seen my panic because she appeared beside me. "I'll cover your tables. Take 5. She gave the man a curious look before walking away. He gestured to an empty booth in the corner. I followed, my legs wooden, preparing for whatever fresh humiliation awaited. "My name is Maxwell Bennett," he said once we were seated. Not that I had asked, not that it mattered. "What can I get you, Mr. Bennett?" I asked, my voice flat, professional. He shook his head. "I didn't come to order." He took a deep breath. "I came to apologize. Of all the things I expected, that wasn't one of them." "Yesterday was inexcusable," he continued. "I spoke to you in a way no one should ever be spoken to. There's no justification for it." I stayed silent, waiting for the but that usually follows such apologies. "My behavior had nothing to do with you," he said. "I had just come from a meeting where a deal I'd worked on for months fell apart. I was angry, and I took it out on you because you were an easy target." He looked me directly in the eyes. It was cruel, and it was beneath me. "I'm deeply sorry." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. People like him don't apologize to people like me. That's not how the world works. "Thank you for the apology," I said stiffly. "Is there anything else?" He seemed startled by my response, as if he'd expected gratitude for his basic decency. "Actually, yes. While I was behaving abhorrently, I noticed the sketches on your order pad." My cheeks burned. Those little drawings were private, just mindless doodles to keep my creativity alive. "They're extraordinary," he said simply. I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Sure they are." "I mean it." His eyes held mine, unwavering. "I've spent my career recognizing talent, and you have it in abundance, raw, untrained perhaps, but undeniable." Something dangerous flickered in my chest, a feeling I couldn't afford. Hope. "What I said yesterday, about you not being meant for more, it wasn't just cruel, it was wrong." He slid a business card across the table. "I own Bennett Media Group. We're launching a new lifestyle magazine next month. We need an illustrator with a fresh perspective." I stared at the card, then back at him. "Is this a joke?" "I never joke about business," he said. "I'd like to hire you." The laugh that escaped me then was edged with hysteria. "You don't even know my name." "Haley," he said, gesturing to my name tag. "And now you know mine. The rest we can figure out over time." My mind raced with questions. Why would a billionaire media mogul want to hire a diner waitress with no degree, no experience, nothing but doodles on scraps of paper? As if reading my thoughts, he added, "This isn't charity or guilt, it's opportunity recognizing talent. Come to my office on Monday. Bring your work. If we're not a good fit, no harm done. You can walk away." "I have a daughter," I blurted out. "I can't just drop everything for an interview that might go nowhere." He nodded. "The position includes benefits, flexible hours, and pay that starts at 3 times what you make here." He stood up, leaving the card on the table. "Monday, 10 a.m. The address is on the card." As he turned to leave, I found my voice again. "Why? Why would you do this?" He paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Because 20 years ago, someone gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. It changed everything." A small smile crossed his face. "And because your sketches really are that good." Then he was gone, leaving nothing but a business card and a choice that terrified me. I picked up the card, running my thumb over the embossed letters. Maxwell Bennett, CEO, Bennett Media Group. It sounded too good to be true, and in my experience, if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. But what if, just this once, it wasn't? Sunday night, I sat at our tiny kitchen table surrounded by every sketch, doodle, and painting I'd created in the past 5 years. Most were on scraps, the backs of receipts, pages torn from notebooks, even a few on paper napkins when inspiration hit during my breaks. They weren't organized or professional, just fragments of dreams I'd never let myself believe in. Lily sat across from me, her chin propped on her hands. "Are you really going to work for the fancy man, Mama?" I arranged the pieces, trying to see them through a stranger's eyes. "I don't know, baby. It's complicated." "Why?" "He said your drawings are good." The simplicity of a child's logic. If only adult life worked that way. "There are lots of good artists in the world, Lily. People with degrees and experience and portfolios that don't include ketchup stains." She picked up one of my sketches, a quick drawing of Miss Patty reading her romance novel, the longing in her eyes captured in just a few lines. "But they're not you," she said with the absolute certainty only an 8-year-old can muster. I didn't sleep that night. I paced our small apartment, calculating risks, imagining worst-case scenarios. If I left the diner, would they take me back when, not if, but when, this fell through? What if it was all some elaborate, cruel joke? What if I wasn't good enough? What if I was? That last question scared me most of all. Monday morning, I dropped Lily at school and took the bus downtown to an address I'd never had reason to visit before. The Bennett Media Group occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming glass tower that made me feel small just looking up at it. In the elevator, I clutched my makeshift portfolio, a borrowed art folder of Lily's, decorated with unicorn stickers, and tried to ignore the reflection of my department store outfit in the mirrored walls. I didn't belong here. Everyone would know it. The receptionist's smile never faltered when I gave my name, though her eyes flickered briefly to my scuffed shoes. "Mr. Bennett is expecting you. Follow me, please." Maxwell's office was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of the sterile glass and chrome I expected, it was warm, filled with books and art. Photographs covered one wall, faces from around the world, ordinary people with extraordinary expressions. "You came," he said, rising from behind his desk. He seemed genuinely pleased, as if he'd half expected me to back out. "I almost didn't," I admitted. He gestured to a chair. "Honesty. Good place to start." I sat awkwardly, the folder on my lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Before you show me your work," he said finally, "I want to explain the position." He laid out the details of a new magazine, Urban Canvas, focused on city life and culture from perspectives rarely seen in mainstream media. They needed an illustrator to create visual stories, someone whose art spoke with authenticity rather than polish. "We don't want another Photoshop perfectionist," he explained. "We want someone who sees the beauty in the everyday, the stories hidden in plain sight, someone who's lived those stories." As he spoke, I began to understand. He wasn't offering charity. He needed something specific, something I might actually have. When he finished, I silently opened my folder and spread my work across his desk. Maxwell studied each piece without comment, his expression unreadable. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I fought the urge to fill the silence with apologies or explanations. Finally, he looked up. "These are exactly what we need." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. "Just like that? You're hiring me based on diner doodles?" He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "Haley, I've been in publishing for 25 years. I know talent when I see it." He leaned forward. "But make no mistake, this won't be easy. You'll need to learn software, work with deadlines, take criticism. There will be late nights and revisions and moments you'll question everything." "So basically like being a waitress but with a desk," I said before I could stop myself. His laugh returned, louder this time. "Exactly, but with better pay and no one snapping their fingers to get your attention." The reality of what was happening began to sink in. This was real. This was possible. "I have conditions," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I need flexible hours for my daughter, and I need to give the diner proper notice. They've been good to me." He nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. "Done. We'll start you part-time for the first month while you transition, full benefits from day one. And if it doesn't work out?" The question that had kept me awake all night. "Then we part ways professionally and I help you find something else. No bridges burned." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" I looked at his outstretched hand, then back at my sketches scattered across his desk. They looked different here, against the backdrop of his success. They looked like possibilities. I took his hand. "We have a deal." As I left his office that day, carrying a contract and an employee handbook, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just hope, but certainty. The certainty that comes when the path ahead suddenly clears and you can finally see where you're meant to go. I didn't know then how hard it would be. I didn't know about the nights I'd cry from frustration, the criticism that would make me doubt everything, the times I'd nearly quit. But I also didn't know about the first time I'd see my illustration on a magazine cover, the awards that would come later, the people who would write to tell me how my art spoke to them. All I knew, walking out of that tower into the bright autumn sunlight, was that something had shifted. The world looked the same, but I was different. And that made all the difference. That first month was the hardest of my life, harder than those sleepless nights after Lily was born, harder than the day her father left. I was learning a new world from scratch while still living in my old one. During the day, I learned software I'd never touched before, sitting beside designers who used terms I didn't understand. I nodded and smiled and went to the bathroom to look up words on my phone. Imposter syndrome wasn't just a feeling, it was my constant companion. Every morning I waited for someone to point at me and say, "You don't belong here." At night I still worked shifts at the diner, coming home with aching feet to practice digital illustration for hours after Lily was asleep. I lived on coffee and determination, terrified of failing, of proving right everyone who'd ever told me to be realistic about my dreams. The first time I submitted work for the magazine, it came back with so many red marks I could barely see my original design. I locked myself in a supply closet and cried for 10 minutes, then wiped my eyes, went back to my desk, and started over. The second time, there were fewer red marks. The third time, a "good work" scrawled in the margin. Small victories that kept me going. After 2 months, I left the diner for good. Karen hugged me tight and whispered, "Get out while you can." Mike, the cook, gave me a rare smile and a paper bag containing my favorite blueberry muffin. Miss Patty cried and made me promise to visit. I did, and I still do. 6 months in, Maxwell called me to his office. My heart raced. certain this was the end, that they'd finally realized their mistake. Instead, he showed me the mock-up of the magazine's first issue. My illustration was on the cover. "We're going to print next week," he said, watching my face as I stared at my art transformed into something professional, something real. "The team unanimously chose your piece. It captures exactly what we're trying to do." I couldn't speak. The illustration was simple. A woman standing at a bus stop in the rain, her reflection in a puddle showing her wearing a crown. It was how I'd felt so many mornings, ordinary on the outside, still believing in something more within. The day the magazine hit newsstands, I took Lily to the corner store. Watching her spot my name in the credits, her face lighting up with pride. "That's my mom. My mom drew that," was worth every exhausted night, every moment of doubt. We moved 3 months later to a small house with a yard. Lily got her own room with walls I let her paint whatever color she wanted. I turned the sunroom into a studio where light poured in through windows that actually opened. At night, I sometimes stood in the doorway watching her sleep, marveling at how much had changed. The transformation wasn't just external. Something was shifting inside me too. I started speaking up in meetings, offering ideas instead of just nodding along. I made friends with coworkers who never treated me like I didn't belong. I began to believe that perhaps I did. A year after I started, Urban Canvas won a publishing award for innovative design. At the ceremony, Maxwell insisted I stand beside him as he accepted it. This vision wouldn't exist without Haley. He told the crowd of industry professionals, "She reminds us all to look for beauty in unexpected places." Later at the celebration, I finally asked the question that had haunted me since that Saturday morning in the diner. Why me? Out of all the struggling artists in the city, why pick the waitress who spilled gravy on your suit? Maxwell swirled his champagne thoughtfully. 20 years ago, I was working as a janitor at a publishing house. I used to read the manuscripts in the slush pile after hours. One night, an editor caught me. Instead of firing me, she asked for my opinion on the book I was reading. He smiled at the memory. 3 years later, I was an editor myself. 5 years after that, I started my own company. He looked at me directly. Talent doesn't always come in the packages we expect. Sometimes the most unique voices come from people who haven't been taught to sound like everyone else. I thought of my diner sketches, how they captured moments no one else seemed to notice. Harold's loneliness behind his newspaper, the tender way the construction workers checked on their youngest colleague, Miss Patty's dreams hidden behind her romance novels. "The day I insulted you was one of my lowest points," Maxwell continued. "I'd forgotten what mattered. Seeing your sketches reminded me of who I wanted to be when I started in this business." He raised his glass slightly. "So perhaps I didn't just help you. Perhaps you also helped me." 2 years into my new life, I was promoted to art director. The struggling waitress was now leading a team, mentoring young artists who reminded me of myself. I started a scholarship program for single parents pursuing creative careers. I took Lily to Paris to see the art we'd only viewed in library books. The transformation was complete, not because I became someone else, but because I finally became who I was always meant to be. And it all began with the worst moment of my life. Today marks 5 years since that fateful encounter in the diner. 5 years that feel like both a lifetime and a heartbeat. Urban Canvas is now published in 12 countries. My illustrations have won awards I once didn't know existed. The house with the yard now has a proper art studio I built last summer, where I teach weekend classes for kids from my old neighborhood. Lily is 13 now, with her own blossoming talent for photography and her mother's determination. Maxwell and I still work together, though our relationship has evolved from employer-employee to genuine friendship and now business partners. Last year, we launched a foundation that provides arts education in underserved communities. We've helped over 200 artists find their voices and their paths. I still think about that moment in the diner sometimes. The humiliation, the tears by the dishwasher, the certainty that I would never be more than what others saw when they looked at me. It no longer hurts. Instead, it reminds me how quickly life can change course. That insult, words meant to diminish me, became the catalyst for everything that followed, not because of the words themselves, but because they caught the attention of someone who saw beyond them to what I could be. I've learned that our lowest moments don't define us unless we let them, that sometimes rock bottom is actually the foundation on which we build something stronger, that talent and dreams don't expire just because we've set them aside for a while. Most importantly, I've learned that we're all just one opportunity away from a completely different life, one person who believes in us, one chance taken despite fear, one moment of courage when it would be easier to stay safe. I'm not special. I'm just someone who was ready when opportunity knocked, even though my hands were shaking when I opened the door. So when people ask me how I went from serving coffee to seeing my work in galleries, I tell them this story. Not to brag about my success, but to remind them that the distance between where you are and where you want to be might be shorter than you think. Sometimes that distance is crossed in a single moment, a moment that might feel like the end of something, but is actually just the beginning. If you found my story inspiring, please hit the like button and subscribe for more life-changing stories. Share in the comments a time when an unexpected moment changed your path. Remember, sometimes our lowest moments can lead to our greatest opportunities, and maybe, just maybe, your turning point is right around the corner. Thank you for listening to my journey.